That's it.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Castle Point Development Control Committee meeting. I'm Councillor Peter Gregg, the chairman of the committee. Before starting the meeting, I need to make the public attending aware of the following. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm does go off, please make your way out using the nearest emergency exit and gather at the front of Runnymede Hall. And meetings of the committee are webcast and broadcast on the internet. If you are seated in the public area of the council chamber, it is possible that your image will become part of the broadcast. So may I ask the Development Management Committee members present who are seated in the chamber in the front row of me to introduce themselves, stating your name only and starting on my left. So, Councillor Anderson.
Good evening, Chairman. Councillor John Anderson.
Good evening, Chairman. Councillor Alan Aycott.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor Kieran Barker.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor Barton Brown.
Good evening, Chairman. Councillor Chas Mumford.
Good evening, Chairman. It's Councillor Tom Skip.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor Jackie Thornton.
Good evening, Chairman. Councillor Simon Hart.
Thanks, Simon. Could I have the two representatives from Canvey Island Town Council, please?
Steve Sage, Canvey Island Town Council.
Councillor Elaine Harvey.
Thank you. May I now ask the officers to introduce themselves again, starting on my left.
Good evening, Chairman. Stephen Garner, Planning Manager.
Good evening, Kim Fisher-Bright, Strategic Developments Officer.
Cheryl Salmon, I'm the committee officer and I'll be taking the minutes.
Good evening, David Bland, Legal Advisor to this committee.
Okay. Anything? Right. Do we have any apologies at all?
Chairman, I haven't received any apologies.
Thank you. Are there any members' interests? Oh, sorry. I'll let you.
Evening, Chairman. I wish to make a short statement in my capacity as legal advisor to the committee this evening. I have been notified that a number of residents approached councillors from this committee during the course of the site visits yesterday afternoon. I understand that the councillors did not engage and maintain their professional independence. I therefore advise this committee they may proceed this evening without hindrance. Thank you.
Chairman, sorry.
Are there any members' interests?
I just want to make it clear that I might have an interest as my property is immediately adjacent to Marine Parade, which is, I think, is subject to this part of this debate tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Does that make any?
It's not adjacent to the application sites.
Okay. I take it there's no other members' interests? Okay. Are the minutes for the Development Management Committee meeting held on the 14th of June agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Public speakers. We have the following public speakers this evening. One, Miss Karen Day in objection for item 1. Do you want her to step up now?
It's up to you now. I think she can stay there.
And the other one is Mr. James Mason from the Environmental Agency. First of all, Miss Karen Day.
She's up there. But it's going to happen after the presentation, isn't it?
Sorry?
The speaking happens after the presentation.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
sorry.
you can stay where you are at the moment.
Sorry.
Sorry, yes. Yeah, sorry.
It's
So
okay, that's what thrown me out. It's not.
Oh, sorry, it was just listed. So then you just go to positive plans and read that stuff.
Right, okay. So we go to item 5. Yep.
Yep.
As there are a number of similarities between the applications, on the agenda, the planning officer will present all 5 applications together. Following questions from the committee on the application, We will then debate each application in turn. I will now hand over to the planning officer to make the presentation. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. As the Chairman's already said, it's going to be a little bit different this evening. I'm going to present to you all 5 applications in one go because they're all very similar to one another and all to some degree linked. So before I go into the applications, I'm going to provide you with a bit of a background to the applications. The applications are alongside part of the Thames Estuary Asset Management Programme by the Environment Agency, which is a 10-year programme to refurbish and replace the tidal defences along Canvey Island and the Thames Estuary. Construction works for the proposal are planned to take place between the start of 2023 and the middle of 2025. It's a 2.5-year scheme. The works to the revetment encompass a 3.2 kilometre stretch along the southern shoreline, stretching from in the west from Thorney Bay all the way along the front up almost to the point up by the Island Yacht Club. So the proposal broadly comprises works to the seawall and temporary construction compound areas. It's only the temporary construction compound areas that you will be examining tonight. The works to the seawall are permitted development and are not part of the Development Management Committee proceedings this evening. And just for some context, these images provide some sort of context for the need for the works, showing some of the damage to the revetment on the seaside and why the works need to be undertaken. As part of the scheme, the site will be broken up into 6 sections along the seawall. These will all be dealt with in turn to deal with various different constraints. So for instance, up near the point there is a habitat site for overwintering birds, so works cannot take place during the winter, and consideration has been given to the sort of Canvey Island seafront entertainment area here where the amusement and fun fairs are, so that they are not impacted by the works during the summer months when they are most busy. The site compounds themselves will also be brought in on different time periods. They will be, some of them will be there for the duration of the works, such as the main site compound here. Some of them will only be there for part, or for instance, site compound 2 will be there for the winter months for two periods, removing the site compound again during the summer months so that it doesn't impact upon businesses in the seafront entertainment area. Turning a little bit to the site selection process, the Environment Agency has examined all sites along the seawall, and they've put forward the applications before you are what they consider to be the best sites for the works. They've been used taking into consideration sites that have been used in the past. For instance, this is a picture of where the main site compound is proposed from 1978 compared to today, where it was used as some sort of storage compound. As you can see here, these are the 5 storage compound, material storage compound is over in Thorney Bay. You've got the satellite compound 1 is here at the bottom of Western Esplanade. You've got satellite compound 2 is located on part of the existing Movie Star Cinema car park and also partially behind the Bandstand. You've got the main site compound and satellite compound 3, which are all one compound, are located on the playing fields to the south of Athol Close. And then you've got satellite compound 4, which is up at the eastern end of the island. So the first application is for, and the first item on the agenda is for the main site compound, which is land south of Athol Close. I'll go through this in more detail because there's quite a lot of considerations. Later on I'll go through the other site compounds in slightly less detail because it's a lot of repetition, and I'll keep it in the interest of keeping it brief. So the main site compound is located here and is currently a flat grassy area with a public footpath running along the length, and you've got some picnic benches. And from the other end you've got the entrance from Eastern Esplanade, and you can just see over the back here is the football club. Now, the proposal is for a large site compound to comprise a security gatehouse, staff and contractor parking, electric vehicle charge points, a 8-bay single-storey office unit, an 8-bay single-storey welfare unit, stores, open areas for working of materials and storage of heavy machinery, topsoil storage up this side here, together with an access trunk road for contractors and heavy machinery through the site from Eastern Esplanade leading out onto the grassed area and heading towards Marine Parade. One of the first considerations in the report is the loss of open space. Whilst it's admitted that this site will result in a loss of open space, it is a temporary one. The site compound is only proposed to be in situ for 2.5 years. It's also important to note that it's not taking up the entire area of public open space. There is a much wider area of the space. There's the children's play area here, and there's further green open space to the north and further to the east. The main compound's location has been chosen due to its proximity to the seawall. The seawall running just to the south of the site. It allows uninhibited sort of pinged access to the seawall, and which will minimise disruptions to residents. And it's considered that under the sort of weighing up the balance of the temporary loss of public open space versus the benefits to the entire island of maintaining the sea defences, that the temporary loss of open spaces in this instance is justified. Surrounding the site, there's proposed to be a 2.4 metre hoarding. Admittedly, there's little you can do with a hoarding to make it more attractive, but the applicants are trying to. There's going to be a selection of artistic panels which will be facing towards so if I go back here, you'll have artistic panels close to the play area. On the sides fronting the residential properties, they're proposing these leaf effect panels just to try and break up the hoarding. There's been some concern raised by members of the public about the impact of the proposal on residential amenity and their properties. Given the degree of separation of the hoarding from the front elevations of properties and side elevations of properties, there will be very little beyond the site hoardings of 2.4 metres, which will be above that height, and it's considered that that would not result in a material loss of light or result in a dominant feature. It's also considered that the applicant has gone through the methods of submitting a construction and environmental management plan. Within that, it introduces a series of mitigation measures to reduce the impact on residential amenity by way of noise, light pollution and dust pollution. Measures that are proposed to be included are the utilisation of mains utilities rather than using noise emitting generators for electricity, restriction of deliveries and movement of equipment to within normal working hours where possible, speed restrictions of vehicles and turning off plant and equipment when not in use, and keeping all local residents and property owners informed of proceedings once the site compound and works have begun. Some lighting is proposed to the hoardings. These will be mounted to the inside faces of the hoardings in several locations and will be angled down with light hoods to prevent as much light overspill as possible. As part of the scheme, the Council's Environmental Health Service have been consulted and they've raised no objection by way of noise or light emissions from the site. It is also important to consider the operating hours of the proposal. All of the site compounds are proposed to be operational potentially between the hours of 6 in the morning and 10 at night. This operation hours are, the majority of the works will be undertaken during the normal working hours of 8 in the morning till 6 in the evening. However, for the seaside of the works, they have to work with the tides. This gives a 4 or 5 hour window each day, and that will be the extended working hours will allow them to work slightly earlier and slightly later just on the seaside for one tidal shift per day. It may be that that tidal shift falls within the normal working hours of 8 till 6, in which case there will be no working outside of the 8 till 6 site operation hours. However, in discussions with the applicant, they've told us that if these extended working hours were not permitted, it would extend the duration of the works and double the time limit that the site compound would need to be in situ, due to reducing the number of working tidal shifts. The proposed site compound, seeing as it's the main site compound and provides a lot of the welfare facilities, is proposed to start being established in January of 2023 and would be in place until the summer of 2025. On site, a large area of vehicle parking is proposed. Now, it's rather unusually for applications, because this is to some degree linked to the other applications. The parking for all of the sites are spread across the sites. So in the report it sets out the parking that's provided, and at the main site compound 35 spaces are proposed, and across all of the compounds 106 spaces are proposed. Given the estimated number of contractors and workers on site, this is considered to be a suitable provision of parking in line with the adopted standards. The applicant has also given thought and consideration to the impact that the additional heavy goods vehicles will have on the island's road network. They will have an impact, but they've done their best to mitigate the impacts. Most of the vehicles will be brought in via the A130 down Canvey Way, and then will be brought along Long Road and then down Thorney Bay Road to access the sites that are all along the site frontage. There will also be some vehicles that need to access the eastern compound. They will be brought along Soms Avenue and along High Street to reach that. The site is proposing to hard surface the site compound so that heavy vehicles don't get bogged down. And as a result, that would increase the amount of surface water runoff and could increase the risk of flooding elsewhere. However, a surface water attenuation system has been designed to mimic the existing characteristics of the site. There will be small bunds all the way around the site to prevent water from the site running off, and it will all be captured on the site and stored in subsurface attenuation tanks before being discharged into the existing surface water system. And now I'll move on to item 2, which is the material storage compound at the Wooden Park on Thorney Bay. So that's the site compound over here near Thorney Bay. This is what the site looks like at the moment. You've got a single vehicular access, and the site compound is proposed to be located just in this grassed area here in a it's got a curved frontage facing onto Thorney Bay Road, and would have a hoarding to either side. Again, the applicant is proposing Harris fencing, a combination of Harris fencings, 2.4 metre hoarding, and decorative leaf effect panels to screen the compound. Adequate space is provided within the compound for heavy goods vehicles delivering to the site to be able to turn around and leave unassisted in a forward gear to prevent vehicles having to reverse out onto Thorney Bay Road. And again, the drainage system has been designed to mimic the existing greenfield runoff rates exhibited by the site currently. So there will be no material difference compared to the existing site than when this is hard surfaced in a type 1 aggregate sort of arrangement. The next item is satellite compound 1, which is to the south of Western Esplanade and west of the Welcome Hut. It's this site here and is split across 2 sites very close together. One on this side of the existing access ramp, which will provide access for the vehicles and machinery up to the seawall, and then one just on the other side of the ramp, as you can see in this arrangement here. So this site will provide some parking facilities for staff and contractors. It will provide sort of welfare facilities and office, material storage and material preparation areas with access directly out onto the sea wall in order to facilitate the works. Yes, opposite properties on the front Western Esplanade, there's proposed to be decorative leaf panels again on the hoarding, whilst the remainder of the site is a combination of 2.4 metre hoarding and terrace fencing to enable access to the site. Again, the site is currently greenfield, and the hard surfacing of this site would have the impact on surface water runoff. So the proposed drainage scheme again adequately deals with this in designing it so that it won't have a material impact and has a storage capacity similar to what is there at the moment. Then moving on to the next one is Satellite Compound 2, which is item 4 of the agenda, which is on the western half of the Movie Star Cinema car park, located here and to the rear of Eastern Esplanade, to the rear of the Bandstand, sorry. You can see the site here. The site will largely cover this area here, running from the parking entrance all the way across, and will just cover these two grassy areas to the rear of the Bandstand. I acknowledge there's an existing footpath running up between there. That will not be obstructed as part of the proposal. As you can see here, there is sort of meeting and site office, and the footpath will be allowed to continue through there, so it will not impact members of the public. Again, this site will provide some parking for contractors, material storage, welfare facilities, preparation areas for works to the seawall. It will also house a asphalt storage box in order to help facilitate the delivery of hot materials to the seawall. Again, the site compound's hoarding will be approximately 2.4 metres high, and to the north of the site and western section of the hoarding adjacent to the bandstand is going to be the decorative leaf effect panels, which will be along here and along here. This compound is proposed to be established at the end of 2023 and demobilised in at the start of sort of towards the beginning of the summer, Easter period of 2024, with a break over summer to minimise the disruption to businesses within the seafront area, and then it will again be reinstated towards the end of 2024 and removed towards the middle of 2025 to continue the works to the sea wall. Finally, we've got item 5, which is Satellite Compound 4, which is the land located to the east of Marine Parade and Beveland Road. This is located up at the eastern end of the island, up near the point. And this is the current area. It currently forms a public area of open space to the east of Marine Parade, and is a memorial ground for the American crew of a B-17 Flying Fortress, which crashed in June of 1944. To the north of the site and west, there's residential properties, and we also have the Leebeck pumping station here, which plays an important role in the discharge of water, with the lead local flood authority and environment agency agreeing that the site discharge of water, surface water runoff from the site directly into the pumping station is sufficient to deal with the discharge of water from the site. This site as well was used as a staging area during, I believe this photo was in 1978, supplied by the Environment Agency, showing similar photos from today when they originally did works to the seawall. And the site compound will again, it will provide additional parking, asphalt sort of hot box and storage area, material storage and open construction areas and working areas for heavy machinery and material preparation, with access off of existing vehicular access which runs to the south of the Leebeck pumping station, and additional gates out onto the seawall to enable easy access. Again, like a tape stuck on repeat, they're proposing some leaf effect hoarding for the sides facing the housing, so along these sides here, to try and soften the effect of the proposed site compound. And this site compound is proposed to be established at the beginning of 2023 and is expected to be in place for until the end of 2023. And so that, at the moment, that concludes my presentation. I'll hand back to the chairman for the public speakers.
Thank you very much. Miss Day, would you like to make your statement now regarding item 1, please? Before you actually start, you've got 3 minutes. Okay? Okay.
Good evening. I'm Karen Day and I reside at 10 Athol Close. I've been asked to speak this evening on behalf of other residents of Athol Close and Leebeck Lane. Whilst we appreciate the need for flood defences and the work to revet the existing seawall, we do understand this needs to go ahead. The devastating loss of amenity to Athol Close and a section of Leebeck Lane is perverse in the extreme, considering that other viable alternatives do exist with better road links and infrastructure, but these do not seem to be considered without bias. Whilst reading the outlines set out by the Development Management Committee, it appears we reached an impasse going forward, with many of our objections, especially with only being afforded 3 minutes, to present a valid case. However, the Fire Authority's objection seems to have been resolved with no or little alteration, even though their grey book is written by the Home Office. May I bring your attention to Planning Policy EC3? Significant adverse effect on the following: traffic, noise, fumes and other disturbance. EC4, health, the natural environment, pollutants to water, land, air, dust and vibration. It states, and I quote, planning will be refused. To take one example of the 10 residential properties that front the north face of the proposed compound, 2 families have children diagnosed with autism, thus having a severe detrimental effect on their health and well-being. This constitutes 20% of the residents just in this area alone. Needless to say, the effect on shift workers who have been working all night and need to sleep during daylight hours, again, this constitutes a minimum of 20%. Apparently, Essex Wildlife raised no objection to the fact that a roost of bats exist and forage along the boundary line because, not surprisingly, the ecological report stated the existence of the bats were unlikely. We have in our possession a video which in fact proves their existence, and a report has been sent to Wildlife England. Little or no effort has been made to remedy this oversight, even though an objection to this has been catalogued. If I could draw your attention to this document produced by the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister, a government circular entitled Biodiversity and Geological Conservation, Statutory Obligation and Their Impact on the Planning System, it states that if bats are identified, then a survey must be completed. Otherwise, failure to do so could potentially lead to a criminal investigation should the proposed planning go ahead. It is now incumbent upon me to report that almost 400 islanders have signed a petition objecting to these plans, of which show total disregard to the concerns of local people. There has been a complete absence of any genuine engagement to local residents. Consultation in principle is not the same as engagement in practice. It is not good enough to just go through the motions with absolutely no transparency, no communication, and any attempts to allay or resolve people's fears in going forward. We are facing a period of total disruption and blight on our lives for a period of up to and as long as 4 years, from start to finish. We are the only compound that is having to have this for this length of time. We understand the committee will vote this evening in an open forum. Please, we ask of you, be magnanimous enough to vote with a clear conscience and not for a predetermined outcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Mason, would you like to make your statement, please?
Good evening. So I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to attend this meeting this evening to speak on behalf of our 5 full planning applications for temporary compound areas. So these compound areas play a critical role to allow us to invest over £50 million of government funding in Canvey Island's tidal defences, the largest single investment since the current walls were completed in 1982. So the 1980s Thames Tidal Defence Scheme constructed the flood wall we have today, but it did not replace the sloping erosion protection on the seaward side of the defences known as the revetment. This revetment protects the clay material within the embankment through which the steel sheet pile core of the defence is driven. So sections of the current revetment can trace its origin back to the 1930s and is now reaching the end of its useful life, meaning our operations teams are following the unsustainable and uneconomic approach of chasing localised failures of the existing concrete blocks. So these failures are unpredictable in location and size and can occur rapidly, as was experienced along the Chapman Sands frontage during the January 2014 tidal surge. An 18-metre length of revetment and embankment materials washed out, exposing the core of the pre-1953 tidal defence embankment, and in some places the materials washed out all the way back to the current tidal defence upstand wall. The emergency repairs were not designed with an extended lifespan in mind and cost in the region of £130,000. Now I think it's worth remembering that unfortunately 58 people died on Canvey Island during the night of the 31st of January and the 1st of February 1953, and the population was significantly smaller than it is today. So given the significance of the tidal defences, which provide a very high standard of tidal flood risk management to over 16,000 homes on Canvey Island, we are renewing and replacing the current revetment of over 3 kilometres stretch between Thorney Bay, the project's westerly extent, and to the north of Leabeck pumping station. So this work is to be completed via our Thames Estuary Asset Management, our Team 2100 programme, which is delivering the first in 10 years of tidal flood defence asset management for the Thames Estuary 2100 plan. So given the extensive linear nature of the works, a main compound is required to deliver the scheme and feeds and supports the 4 temporary satellite compounds we've seen today. The main compound will be required for the duration of the scheme, and the 4 satellite compounds are required to help deliver the certain phases of the works. And our selection criteria for these compounds have been based around a number of criteria. The maximum available existing open space of over 4,000 square metres for the main compound, and a minimum available existing open space of at least 900 square metres for the satellite compounds. The available open space meeting these minimum areas being located close to the tidal defences, and these areas also being located on the southern and eastern sides of the roads to minimise disruption as much as possible. And also the location of the previous compounds, as we've seen, or the work storage areas that were used to deliver the 1980s Thames Tidal Defence Scheme. So the criteria are also underpinned by a necessity of the scheme to minimise the disruptions to the community as far as reasonably practicable. So the new revetment is to be an open stone asphalt, also known as OSA. So this material is delivered to site for almost immediate use, as it has key temperatures at which it needs to be laid. So as a result, this has ruled out the use of the river as a means of transporting the open stone asphalt, as the foreshore is too shallow to allow access by suitable vessels for deliveries at low tide when the work needs to be carried out. So as a result, the project team have made the utmost effort to balance proximity to the site against the proximity to residents, the challenges faced by the existing road network and available open space on the southern and eastern sides of the roads local to the works. The latter point is key, as it avoids the need for the work to cause additional disruption to life for the residents of Canvey Island caused by the plant and lorries having to track backwards and forth across the roads, something that would likely require temporary traffic lights. And these additional movements would likely increase the time taken to complete the scheme. So the project team spent a significant period of time scouring the sites that met the criteria to create a list of candidate sites for a main compound. The key areas identified, we've seen today, have then been discounted, include the land to the south of the Roscommon Way at the Thamesview 130 Business Park area, and also the former Chapman Sands Sailing Club. The Roscommon Way site may seem favourable at first glance, given it's away from the residential areas and is in an area that once saw the main works compound for the 1980s scheme on the island. However, this area is therefore far away from the works site, meaning a much greater impact upon the current road network, as plants, the open stope asphalt and workers would need to travel between the two locations at all times of the day. Aside from the significantly increased carbon emissions, this would also see a much longer construction period and may also need more satellite compounds as a result, making the scheme more expensive than required and cause further disruption to those closer to the works extent. Consideration has also been made to the former Chapman Sands Sailing Club area. However, this site is a smaller site than required and is on the northern side of the eastern Esplanade. This would mean that all residents of the Beach House Gardens estate using the eastern Esplanade would be subject to traffic management measures, aside from the fact that the site is adjacent to the same residence as our current proposed compound location. So our current proposed main compound provides good access to the eastern Esplanade, is immediately adjacent to the works extent, meaning machines do not need to track across existing roads. Furthermore, this site used to be also used as a material storage area to help construct the 1980s tidal defence along the stretch of the southern shoreline. The site is vitally important as it provides an existing open area to the once again work to improve the tidal defences benefiting the local community. So all the more important as there is an ever shrinking amount of available space for this kind of activity on the island today in comparison to the early 1980s. So we fully acknowledge that there is no perfect solution to delivering the required work to the tidal defences, and we are fully aware that there are hundreds of local residents that will regrettably experience the temporary inconveniences required to live with the temporary compounds needed to deliver the essential works to the Canvey Islands tidal defences. We would have to review the viability of delivering a scheme on the southern shoreline within the Team 2100 programme should these applications not be supported, with hundreds of thousands of pounds incurred to re-engage with the suppliers and significantly delay this vital project. The project team embarked on an extensive programme of external engagement during the 2021 with council officers, councillors, local business owners, as well as local residents. This engagement was as thorough and as wide-ranging as reasonably practicable whilst working within the COVID-19 working practices for public bodies. It was supported by a dedicated webpage for the scheme, full of information on the scheme itself, how it is to be delivered and proposed compound locations. Our team identified 400 residential properties adjacent to proposed compounds, over 200 being adjacent to the main compound, and wrote to them to invite them to join a series of evening virtual meetings in late September 2021. These meetings were intended to present the scheme, why it is needed, the benefit it brings, and also the proposed location and layout of the compounds. It is regrettable that only 3 residents joined the virtual sessions. This low attendance was despite a layered approach of advertising for the sessions, including briefings to councillors, information shared on the scheme's website and on social media via both our own platform and those of Castle Point Borough Council and Canvey Island Town Council. To proactively follow up on the very low response rates to the virtual meetings, and as soon as changes came in regards to the COVID-19 working practices, we then planned and promoted a face-to-face drop-in session. This was held in the Knightswig Shopping Centre in early December 2021 to talk to the local community about the scheme and how it will be delivered. We used space kindly offered to us in November 2021 in the November 2021 issue of the Canvey Island Town Council newsletter, alongside our own partners' social media, to promote the session that was held from 9 AM to 1 PM. Within that morning, our team spoke to a handful of people, all of whom were supportive of the scheme, with no issues raised with the scheme as presented. All of the proposed compounds are laid out in an effort to minimise the impacts upon local residents as much as possible. For example, the main compound sees vehicles parked and materials stored on its southern edge as far from the houses as possible. Cabins are single storey to avoid overlooking properties. Top soil is stripped from the site and is placed along the eastern boundary to act as a further buffer to the playground areas, and the compound itself is set back from the property boundaries on its northern and western edges to allow people to continue walking to the playground area on the eastern Esplanade. The scheme and its compounds are seeking to deliver improvements to the natural and built environments to benefit local residents and the community. The works themselves will improve pedestrian flow along the seaward maintenance track, a tarmac path on the landward side of the wall running from Thorney Bay to Chapman Sands, and new steps will improve access to the foreshore. All compounds will be fully reinstated back to grass open spaces and replanted with an enhanced wildflower grass seed mix. Discussions have been held with Castle Point Borough Council officers regarding leaving planters and benches from the compounds in grassed areas once we have demobilised. So one final point I would like to make to the committee is that the new revetment that these compounds help to install has a much lower need for future maintenance activities than the existing concrete blocks. This means much less disturbance to the local residents along the southern shoreline and wider community on the island. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mason. As these applications are on Canvey Island, would the Canvey Island Town Council representatives like to say anything?
No comments.
Okay. Before we consider each of these items on the agenda, do members have any questions for the planning officer about any of the planning applications? Please note this is a member's opportunity to seek clarification from the planning officer on any matters they are unclear of regarding the application. Members should refrain from making statements about their views or the proposals. These should be expressed in the debate section of the meeting. So are there any questions? Councillor Skip.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I have two questions. The first one is resulting, both about the main compound site. Can the officer confirm the distance from the properties on the north side of that site from the hoarding, please? And the second question relates to car parking over the whole sites in general, but also particularly on the main site, where there's 35 parking spaces available. If those parking spaces are fully utilised at any particular day, will the employees and contractors be required to find parking on the other sites, please?
Thank you. I think if I quickly flick back to the first site compound, the main site compound, so that we've got a layout to look at. So here we go. So the first question on distance from properties. The distance from the front elevation of number 2 Athol Close to the site hoarding is a little over 10 metres, and then I believe it reduces slightly along here to just over 6 metres, although I can double check that in the report. And then while I'm checking that, the parking area, if it's fully utilised by staff and contractors, that will be the other sites will be open for parking, and there is the Environment Agency have proposed shuttle buses and minibuses between the two, between the site compounds, to enable workers to be able to be ferried between the compounds, so that they don't necessarily have to all park at the main site compound or nearest to where they're working. They can park at one of the compounds. Unfortunately, we can't prevent staff and contractors from parking elsewhere. However, the availability of free parking within the site compounds is something that I think, and the convenience of parking close to their welfare facilities and site offices is something that would be an attraction. And thank you, Kim. The hoarding would be located, so from number 287 Eastern Esplanade, the side elevation of that, it would be 7.5 metres away, and it would be 4 metres from 2 Athol Close, the side of 2 Athol Close. And then you've got 7 metres to the south of from the front elevations to the hoarding there. And then it's, yes, it is correct, in 10 metres from the front of the property at 2 Athol Close to where the hoarding is proposed.
Councillor Mumford, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Stephen. A couple of questions from me regarding Marine Parade. I read the construction traffic management plan, and it states in there, I think at 5.26, it says it is unknown whether Marine Parade is an adopted highway and consequently the ownership of the land ? Essex Highway state that this is an unadopted road, and I think we all understand being an unadopted road, that opens quite a potentially a can of worms regarding legal aspects of who's responsible for the upkeep and liability of that area. At 3.1 in the Construction Traffic Management Plan, it goes on to say, it is also proposed to improve the gravel surfacing to sections of Marine Parade between Park Avenue and Beveland that are currently unmade gravel tracks. The improved surfacing will remain unmade. This is subject to engagement with Castle Point Borough Council and local residents. I see from the conditions that that's not currently a condition, and I would like to see that as that consultation as a condition, if possible, because I think residents need to be well aware of their what is proposed in this stretch of road, and are there any implications really for residents who front onto that road or who abut that road if anything untoward was to happen during the construction period, either from members of staff or to other members of the public. I think we need like a legal opinion on that, if David Bland can give that. Or anyway, I'd like that as a condition if that's possible. Thank you.
So the works to Marine Parade are not actually encompassed by parts of these applications. The applications that are being considered tonight are the site areas as specified in each application for the site compounds. The proposed works for the potentially to Marine Parade to sort of like, because it's unadopted and unmade, to add some more substantial surfacing for the materials is something that the Environment Agency have considered. It's not something that is required by the Permission. I did speak to the Environment Agency earlier today about this matter, and due to, as you rightly say, the issues with land ownership and the different property rights, they are looking at potentially, they're not sure yet, using the area of grass verge to the south of Marine Parade as a construction road instead, so that there's no potential legacy suits against them and requirements for them to continue to maintain the unadopted road, which wouldn't be their responsibility. However, that's my understanding of the case, but it doesn't form a material part of these planning applications, and so I think a condition on this wouldn't be enforceable and meet the conditions tests which are set out in the National Policy Framework.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I just, obviously want to flag that up as a potential problem. I think, I don't want to comment any further on the overall application, but I think if that's going to be considered, I think that's beneficial. Thank you.
Councillor Nicott.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just want to kind of support what Councillor Montford just said. As you know, that is part of my ward, Marine Parade. And I and my other two colleagues, we regularly get emails and telephone calls about fly tipping down there. And when we have spoken to residents about the state of the road, they all say we like it as it is, because if it's made up or levelled out, we're going to start getting, in their words, boy racers go through there. And regarding, as Councillor Munford said about lights and things, I think most of us can remember the day when a councillor got his van and put a box on it and a step ladder on top of the box and climbed up and changed the light bulb. And that caused quite a problem because due to insurance reasons, if the light bulb falls out and hits someone, who's responsible? It's just unadopted. The other points I wanted to make, Mr. Chairman, one of our colleague ward councillors has spoken to the residents, and actually it was yesterday afternoon, and he's come back to me to say that it was suggested to him, would it be possible for the compound to be taken further back than the 10 metres? I'm not quite sure how far they want, but could it be made a bit further back into the field? And the final point I'd like to make, that regular going round that area, I noticed yesterday that the wooden bollards, the concrete bollards at the end of Esplanade, which stopped the vehicles going into the field, had been removed, and a gate has been put there, a typical type of gate what Castle Point Borough Council uses for when they don't want people to get onto sites. That gate, has that been put in for this particular development? And I read in the report that there will be a gatekeeper. Is that where the gatekeeper will be set or put, or is he actually at the compound? Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So in response to the setting the compound back, this is the site compound area that the applicant, the Environment Agency, has submitted to us. It's a site compound that covers sort of 6,500 square metres. And within the confines of the site, as you'll see here, you've got the existing sort of storage, surface water runoff area. You've got the park here. They require this level of space for their material storage and all of the requirements that they need for this site compound. I believe by reducing the site, as a planning officer, we didn't have a reason to request it to be moved further away. My professional opinion is that it complies with the council's policies and guidance, and as a result, there wasn't a necessity to request that it stepped in. Insofar as is there the opportunity to step it further in without further consultation with the applicant, there's a strong chance that they need the available space to use for parking, material storage, site offices, and moving it further away from the site boundaries of the properties to the north would reduce this level of space, and given the constraints of the site elsewhere, it might not be able to be provided and might not provide the function that is required by the applicant. And then I too noticed, it was only yesterday on the site visit that I noticed that the concrete bollards had been replaced with the gate. This is nothing to do with the applicant, it's something to do with the council. The gatekeeper is proposed to be housed in a purpose-built gatehouse here. The gates will be in roughly the same position as the gates that were there yesterday, and you'll notice on the late representations that were before you this evening that one of the conditions is proposed to be amended, because when I wrote the report I was under the impression that the bollards were still there and it required the replacement of those bollards after the works. Now that there's a gate there, the condition's been amended to reflect the fact the gates are there and there's no longer bollards.
Are there any further questions? Yes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just really want to address the biodiversity piece. There's two bits here. The residents have suggested that there are a presence of bats. There's a video recording bats there, yet nobody seems to have addressed that situation. Obviously, I'm new to this process. Should that be looked into further? Should somebody be going down there reviewing this? It's obviously been brought to the attention of people on a couple of occasions and not been addressed. So from an ecological perspective, I believe that should be looked at. And also the land afterwards was one of my main questions, because we've seen with similar things like this previously, once the developers leave, the land is left looking pretty poor, in a worse condition than it was before. So obviously the chap that spoke previously said they were going to put in some more flowers and land, etc. Are they held accountable for that? Can we ensure that the land is put back correctly? as it was before, with the same look and appearance as before. Nobody wants to be looking out on building sites once everybody is gone. So for me, it's the after effects of the ecological situation. Thank you.
In response to the comments about sort of the biodiversity and bats, officers have been provided none of the evidence that's been stated to be there. We've had the applicant has submitted a preliminary ecological assessment undertaken by a qualified ecologist, in which they've stated that the presence of bats is highly unlikely. There are no roosting sites within the site compound. Within the site compound areas, there are no roosting. It's an open field. There is nowhere for the bats to roost. We cannot control bats on their foraging areas, and we've not received any objections from Essex Wildlife Trust. So there's not been any objections by Essex Wildlife Trust who which we would expect if they had an objection, then we would look into the matter more closely. But due to the presence of the ecologist's report and the lack of objection, we've, as sort of set out in page 13 of the agenda, we've not raised an objection to the proposal on that basis. Insofar as the reinstatement of the sites, all of the site compounds have a condition on them that requires a site survey to be undertaken prior to any works being undertaken on site and submitted to the council. Following the removal of the site compounds, the requirement of the condition is that it will be reinstated to at least the same condition that it was currently found in. We cannot require them, the applicant, to make it better or provide improvements. That is entirely within their own gift. If they choose to make improvements to the site, they may. What we can require and what we can enforce through the condition is that the site is returned back to its current state. At the moment, the applicant is proposing for all of the sites to return them, because most of the sites are green open space, to return them with a wildflower mixed seed sort of grass, and it will be enforceable that if it wasn't carried out and the site isn't returned to the suitable condition, there is the avenue for the authority to enforce under, because there would be a breach of the condition requiring the site to be returned back to its former condition.
Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Stephen, where the huts are going to be for the offices and that, you're going to have tanks under there to take the water and that. What sort of base are they going to sit on, the offices? Is it going to be concrete, type 1 or what?
I believe all of the compounds, with the exception of the one on the Movie Star Cinema car park, which is already largely hard surfaced, which will be using the existing hard surfacing. The rest of the compounds will be using a sort of an aggregate based similar to type 1 or similar, which will be what is being sat on. I'm not aware that the buildings will be sat on concrete. My understanding is that there will be the surface water attenuation tanks buried beneath the buildings, and then on top of that will be the buildings. Whether there's a layer of aggregate in between, I'm not sure. But one of the objections raised initially to the proposal by the lead local flood authority was concerned that in the event of a high water table, which is on Canvey, that the tanks could float up out of the ground. This has been addressed by sort of engineering calculations to confirm that even with a high water table or in the event of sort of high large rain events, the tanks will remain in the ground and will not be impacted by that.
I'll come back on that. You reckon it's going to be type 1, so that's going to be having to be pounded down. What effect is that going to have on the houses nearby, all along
there? In respect of the noise and vibrations, there's been, in the construction and environmental management plan that was submitted, as I explained, there's a number of measures for reducing it. The type 1 will likely be compacted and also by vehicles driving over the top of it. There's no direct sort of compensation or consideration of the impact this may have by the applicant on residential properties. But as I believe you're alluding to, any damage to private properties would be a civil matter between the applicant, the Environment Agency, and the party involved.
Councillor Thornton, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the main objections seem to form around Athol Close. Everything seems to be focusing on that one compound. I don't know if there is any way that could be adjusted, that section, that particular one, on the overall plan. Secondly, Councillor Mumford brought up a very good point on the unadopted road. The frontages are actually legally liable for anything that happens on an unadopted road. So any make-up that the EA do on it or how it's left behind will be the ownership or the legal responsibility whoever owns the particular one fronting onto it. So it does sound like that there are some issues that do need to be addressed on this, and I don't know whether we're at the point where we can move forward on it while there are such issues to address. Also, we're going to have an awful lot. This is a development that's not a development, because after 2.5 years it's not going to be there. But in that time we're going to have an awful lot of movement of traffic going backwards and forwards, and that's likely to have an impact on the existing road infrastructure. And from what I can see, there isn't anything that accounts for any damage that's happened during the period of time when it's in intensive use. And I didn't know whether that could be sort of accounted for in any way. And finally, what my colleague said about the biodiversity. Now, you're going to take, they're low biodiversity sites, but nevertheless you're going to take away all of it. You're going to surface it, put things on it, and then take it away. Now, I believe that all developments now have to have a net gain biodiversity, so therefore it should be put back to a higher standard than it exists already. Or have I, because this is a development that's not a development, is that not the case here? Thank you.
So to answer your question about the sort of the road condition, as I explained to Councillor Mumford, it's not something that falls within the remit of this application, the making up of Marine Parade, and as the Environment Agency are aware of the liabilities of the people who front onto Marine Parade, which is why they are looking in. They've said to me that they're looking into not using Marine Parade itself, but using the space next to it to construct a whole road.
If that's the case, then surely the plans that have been submitted for us to look at tonight are not fully sort of conclusive, because there are still issues to address.
The plans are not for the road. The plans are for the site compounds. So the road is something that could be constructed by the Environment Agency. They could choose, the applicant themselves could choose to make up Marine Parade in whatever agreement needs to be made with the people who front onto Marine Parade, or they could choose themselves to use the strip of land next to it to form their own trunk road. It's not actually part of this application, and despite the fact that it is included in the documents, and I have referred to it in my report. Insofar as I fully agree that there is the potential during the heavy traffic use, the large number of heavy goods vehicles that are going to be brought onto the island to facilitate this, the works to the seawall, there is the potential for these to damage the island's network. Condition 5 of the first item on the agenda is for a highways condition survey to be taken place from where the first site compound is, on Thorney Bay Road here, all the way along the sea frontage, in order to submit, and then after the fact it will be the requirement of the Environment Agency to reinstate the road. So if there's any damage caused, and it just so happens that if there's any damage, even if it's not caused by them. It's the requirement that the road is reinstated to its previous condition as set out in the report that they'll have to submit. And then moving on to your biodiversity, it's a temporary site compound. It won't be there in 2.5 years' time, which is why it will be being returned to its existing condition.
Silence, please.
But it will have lost an element of biodiversity in that time, and as a development, that's something we can considering. Does it not have to be increased?
Yes, it's got a small biodiversity gain, but it's not got a high biodiversity value. So whilst it will be lost for the 2.5 years that the site compound is there, it will be reinstated, and the applicant is proposing to put the seed mix that they're proposing to use is a wild flowering seed mix. So it will return it back to the same, if not better condition than it is at the currently.
And finally, I'm not sure if this comes under this application. Back in the consultation period, it was said the disabled access up onto the beach was going to be addressed through the revetment works that were coming through. Now, is that, as the actual revetment works are coming under permitted development, they're not coming to this committee. So how is it covered? How do we know that the disabled access is going to be included?
The short answer is we don't. It falls under the works to the permitted development works. Works to the seawall and part of the voluntary betterment works that the Environment Agency are undertaking, which include currently all the way along here from Thorney Bay up to the Labworth. The footpath is sort of a gravel, and further along from the seafront entertainment area up towards the main site compound is also a gravel top. Part of the proposal is to hard surface, from the Environment Agency, is to hard surface that and also provide new access ramps to the seawall. However, it's a part of the permitted development scheme, which they're undertaking, and isn't something that forms part of these applications.
Do we have any control over that? Do we have any way of ensuring that?
No, we don't have any way of ensuring the provision of those.
Councillor Hart, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try and not repeat anything. In regard to the extended hours, and you said it's now from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m, is that 7 days a week? Now, is that the start time, or is that the time that people can get on site? And is it the sea side of the wall mainly, or is it including the main storage areas? Oh, that's one more question. Other question, but if you want to say that first, please.
So the hours are only Monday to Friday, and those times are the times that the site compound is allowed to be open. So it's allowed to be open at 6 o'clock, and it has to shut at 10 according to the rules of the condition. The working hours are to the seaside, the land side of the wall are proposed to take place during normal working hours at 8 till 6. It's only the works to the seaside of the revetment which are proposed to take place during those elongated opening hours of the construction compound.
So lorries couldn't arrive at 6, they had to arrive at between 8 or after 9 o'clock. I only ask because I live very close to a supermarket, as close as it is for the people living there, and we get a lot of vehicular noise. People, if their engines are still running, or mainly I've got written down here is the warning buzzers, reversing buzzers. So if the lorries are reversing during the day when there's people about, that's fine. But if they get in there at 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock, whatever, 7 o'clock, they are annoying for people. It's a lot of noise, and moving stuff inconsiderately around the site could make a noise pollution.
In speaking to the Environment Agency, and in a lot of the documents with the traffic management plans, the construction environment management plans that they've submitted, they detail that wherever possible, deliveries will be made during, and movements between the sites of materials and heavy machinery will be made during normal working hours. It's admitted in their statements that there will be some vehicle deliveries. For instance, the hot asphalt that needs to be delivered when it's required. So if they are working, say, on an early tidal shift, that's say they need it at 7 o'clock, it will be delivered at 7 o'clock, but only to the site where it's needed. That may be the main site compound, it may be one of the other site compounds. Wherever possible, they've stated in their documentation that they will try to minimise deliveries and movement outside of these periods, and a number of the conditions require that they abide by what they've set out in these documents. So if, for instance, it was found that all of their deliveries were turning up prior to 8 o'clock and there were no deliveries other times of the day, it's something that could be looked into. It's also important to note that there's a condition on them, that each of the applications, that requires engagement with the residents and provision of the working times, so that whilst it's admitted there will be an impact on residents, they can at least be aware in advance, either on the site compound hoardings, they're proposing bulletin boards and sort of like a central contact hub, and on their website the working times outside of the usual working hours, so that members of the public, to the best of their ability, can be aware and try and work around these.
And the warning buzzers, I know I've got a commercial vehicle and I can turn the warning buzzer off. Not obviously health and safety on the site is important, but if they're early, if they're really early, you don't want to be woken up by a buzzing lorry while someone's trying to reverse. Is that something that could be put in?
It's not something that's been considered. There are a number of details, such as not allowing idling vehicles and heavy machinery, which can cause a great deal of noise and disturbance, especially during the early hours. I'm not aware of it being specifically mentioned, turning off reversing buzzers, but as you mentioned, it may be something that's required under health and safety legislation on sort of working sites, that it's there as a warning. So it might not be something that can be addressed by way of a planning condition.
Thank you. I think it is possible, but I think it needs to be written into it. Another thing I come in, one of the other points, it's along the line of what Councillor Barton Brown mentioned, is the landscaping after it's finished. And I know the Speaker said it will be done, and you mentioned it as well with mixed seed and everything else. Would there be any chance of public consultation on what goes there, if it's a blank canvas again? And I know the council in the past have been looking for sites for tree planting, and tree planting sites are quite hard to come by within the council-owned property, so it's something that could be considered as a site for tree planting. And then if I go on to ask another question, the hard surface that was mentioned by Councillor Taylor, it's not just the laying of the hard surface, it's the removal of it afterwards that I'm concerned about. If it's concrete, then they have to break it up, and the vibration, not just for the people who live there, but for the damaging for other properties and the seawall. So that's one part of it. Also the attenuation tanks, and I fight very hard for attenuation tanks in most planning meetings. Will the attenuation tanks remain after the site has been cleared and not returned back to grass? Is that something that we can look to keep?
So turning to the first question about landscaping, it's important for councillors to that we can't require anything better than what is there at the moment. If the applicant chooses to do that, that's their own wish. They may do so in consultation with the council. It's also important to know that anything that's left there is council-owned land. It's the responsibility of the council to maintain afterwards. I know you mentioned tree planting. There's also the need to be careful because there's a surface water drain that runs through the site. There's the issues potentially with tree roots impacting upon this, and as I said, the maintenance of the trees. So it is something that could be looked at in the future, but it's not something that we can require under this. It's maybe something that you'd be best off speaking to Trudy Bragg about, and it's something that maybe the council could look into if the councillors are interested, and see whether there's anything the applicant would be willing to do. However, there's nothing that they can be required to do. As far as breaking up the hard surfacing and the attenuation tanks, my understanding is that it's going to be an aggregate based, so yes, it will require some breaking up when it's removed, but not sort of required sort of jackhammers that might be required to break up a concrete base. The surface water attenuation tanks are not proposed to be retained. This is partially because it would be the council's responsibility to maintain and continue to ensure they're kept up to date and working, and also given that it would be a grass-filled site after the fact, if the surface water attenuation tanks are left remaining and draining the grassed area, there's a chance that they may lead to the grass not being able to grow properly. There's examples on developments elsewhere in the country where you can see where surface water attenuation tanks have drained the areas, and you can almost see the patches where the drains are, where the grass has died because there's not enough water in the ground.
If I can come back on it, it seems to me an awful waste of an opportunity for increasing the drainage capabilities of Canvey Island. Yes, don't use it to for water attenuation from the site, because you won't need it so much now, because it will be dug back up and put mud and trees and grass on.
Councillor Hart, can we have a question, please?
The question is, can we? It still remains: is can we retain the attenuation tanks in some form? We've got at least 2.5 years to look at it. If we can use them in some way, is it in a formal question? Is it possible that we can look at retaining them in some way to improve the flood capabilities of that part of Canvey Island? Because it is near the pumping station. You could use it as attenuation for the pumping station.
Under this application, no, because planning can't be used to sort of provide for other existing shortfalls and deficits. However, potentially it's something that council members that could be worked on, but it's not something that can be considered under the applications tonight.
Final question, if I may. The site by Thorney Bay, the picture you showed, the grass picture, that's it there. It's not a flat area. So are they proposing to, obviously they are proposing to level it to make it a site, and again it comes back to, are they going to put that back as it is now, and do the people in that area want it put back like that, or would they rather have a flat area? Is it something that could be discussed with Baywatch or the people who use that area?
So the requirements of the condition to undertake site surveys for each of the compounds prior to works beginning would mean that after the fact, if they did any levelling, I know on this site there's proposed to be some low-level earth bunds around the site to contain the surface water, and any levelling that would be taken, those earth bunds and the levelling as a requirement of the condition would require to be reinstated to its existing condition. However, if obviously again not under this planning not under these applications, however, if it's something that the council or another committee wish to look into, it's something that could be altered and something that could be looked into, but just not under this committee.
Councillor Aycock, please.
Thank you, Chairman, for letting me come back. Could we ask the officer that someone spoke about the B17 bomb site? There's a plaque at the bottom of Beveland Road, and on the wall near the yacht club there's a plaque on the wall marking 75 years of the incident, and there's a bench along there which again I think's got a plaque on, which was done by the town council, the 3 items paid for. Could we ask the Environment Agency if they could write to the town clerk, Canvey Island Town Council, and say that if we have to move the plaques on the bench, that they will be reinstated when we're finished. So you said yesterday that the picnic tables might have to be moved on the main site, and again the Environment Agency have said that they will return to where they are. And the other point was Thorney Bay and the Friends of Concord Beach has been mentioned. They did say to me some time ago, if I ever come across a planning application where tarmac or asphalt was in use, could we get someone to look at the ramp from the car park at Thorney Bay up to the wall, because it's considered to be at the wrong angle, and being as possibly you know that on the beach there now, or for a few years, there's been concrete footpaths put in and picnic tables, for people to use with disabilities and wheelchair accessible. So if, again, whether that can be done as a goodwill gesture for those using that site. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just to come back to you on that, it's obviously the works to the seawall themselves are permitted developments. We don't have any control over those. However, it is in consultation with the Environment Agency. There's admitted that a number of benches, picnic benches, seating areas, and potentially plaques, as you say, may have to be removed temporarily. It's the Environment Agency's intention to store all of these and then after the fact replace them back where they were if they're required to be moved. So some of the benches may, as you've highlighted, like on this slide here, there's some picnic benches right in the middle of where the site compound is and on the main compound. With the access ramp from Thorney Bay, I know there are proposals as part of the permitted development works they've got to increase and shore up some of the ramps to enable their heavy machinery to utilise it. It's not something that can be dealt with under these applications, but it may be something that in discussion the applicant may be willing to consider. Again, writing to the town council, I'm sure it's something that the applicant will be willing to consider and undertake, but it's not something that we can require as part of the application. But as I said, it is their intention to, if there's something there at the moment and it needs to be moved temporarily, it will be securely stored and then replaced after the fact.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing the officer to reply. I just wanted to make the point that they weren't put in by the Borough Council, which have been informed that items may have to be removed. They will be returned. I was kind of pointing out if the town council could be told that, because someone might go onto the town council and say, oh, where's the bench gone? They would be able to reply, say it's been removed, but it'll be brought back at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aycock. Councillor Anderson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Couple of questions. It would appear that the cinema parking spaces were going to disappear. What's happening there? Number one, please.
Yes, some of the parking spaces will be lost from the cinema car park during the 2 winter month periods that it will be there. The site compound and car parking will be reinstated during the summer months, which is when the sort of seafront entertainment area is at its busiest. This was part of the consultation the Environment Agency had with local business owners along that stretch. It's admitted that there will be some loss of parking for the cinema, but there are alternative public car parks just sort of further to the east, and also you've got the Labworth car park further to the west as well, which in the scheme of things and given the temporary nature are considered to make up for the temporary loss of parking spaces for the cinema. And I believe the Environment Agency have been in discussions with the property owner about the loss of these parking spaces and the impact this may have on their business, and that's subject to their discussions with them. But they're proposing to use those parking spaces during the winter months for this site compound.
Thank you. And the other one, the residents seem to be quite rightly asking questions about what is the shortest distance from the main compound to the houses in Athol Close? What is the shortest meterage for one of the houses?
So you're talking from the front elevation of, I believe it's this property here, which is on, I believe that's Leebeck Lane or Leebeck Close. From the front elevation to the site, 2.4 metre site hoarding, it is 7 metres.
7 metres.
From the front elevation of the dwelling to the site hoarding is 7 metres.
Silence, please.
21. Can you show me in this room 21 metres, 7 metres. Can you show me the distance from that wall out to here? Roughly.
Basically from that wall to where the chair yeah, it's probably it's about from that wall to about here.
From where you are to that wall?
To that wall, yeah.
Well, I think more questions will be asked about that later on. Thank you.
Councillor.
Yes, I'd like to go back to the question of the bats. Now, I understand that because there isn't any roosting if it's a flat field, but when DMC was under chairmanship of Councillor Dick, there was an agreement to consult with the local wildlife group, so that would be the badger protection and the bat group, etc., if it was likely that something was going to be there. Now, that did happen for a while, but it seems it's not happening again. Moving forward, I know it's not going to affect this particular application, but could we reinstate that where we do consult with the local groups?
We do. So as a result of the complaint, objections from members of the public, we consulted with Essex Wildlife Trust, and on similar applications, if we were to receive an objection on the basis of, say, badgers, we would consult with the local badger group as well.
Yeah, there is a specialist bat group, though, isn't there? In the same way you've got a specialist badger group, you've got the specialist bat group, and it doesn't seem like they were consulted.
No. But it's something that we can look into in the future and make sure that they're consulted.
Okay. Councillor Bart.
Councillor Mumford first.
All right, sorry, Councillor Mumford.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I know this is not a material planning consideration. However, when we look along the seafront, we are absolutely blessed with some fantastic artworks and murals that have been painted depicting, many aspects of Canvey Island's history, etc., etc., including the B17 site at the point. Has any consideration been given to protecting these murals as much as is physically possible, and if so, what undertaking has been given to protect them? And because clearly people come from a long way and to see these, and they really are part and parcel of Canvey Island. Thank you.
I completely agree with you. It's something that that was part of the conversations in the very early planning stages of this, when we were having early discussions with the Environment Agency. Obviously, as you've mentioned, it doesn't form part of these application sites. However, the Environment Agency have said that wherever possible, because they're painted on the actual concrete wall, it's possible to screen those from the area that they're proposing to do the works. So wherever possible, it's hoped that any damage and loss of them will be minimised to only areas where it's not possible to protect those murals, because I completely agree with you, they're a fantastic part of the seawall and part of the area.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you.
Councillor Barton-Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say that the main issue here is this main site, because of the longevity of how long the site's going to be there, the impact to the residents, how close it is to the properties. Excuse me, I forget the chap's name who spoke on behalf of the Environment Agency. He did mention other sites were looked at, i.e. Ross Common Way, where there is an industrial area away from the residents. Were full site investigations carried out? Were full sort of paperwork and reports drawn up on that? They weren't just put across through because it was going to be hard work, it's further away, time, money. Were these sites actually really looked at and properly reported on? Thank you.
Other sites were proposed as part of the initial sort of pre-application process. about 20 sites were proposed along the seawall, not just for the main site compound, but also for different satellite compounds. In respect of the main site compound, as you've picked up, it's the site area that's required that's the main constraining feature. And given that the works are along this stretch of seawall, it made sense for the main site compound to also be along this stretch of seawall. I know residents mentioned yesterday, why could it not be over at Small Games playing field? And you've mentioned, why can't it be over at Roscommon Way, which is further over to the west? The issues with those sites are they don't provide direct access to so that would mean that large machinery would have to be travelling along longer stretches of the island's roads. Heavy goods vehicles, the hot asphalt being delivered would still be required to be delivered along these parts of the site. But in addition to that, you would have additional vehicle movements. Instead of moving from the main compound here to maybe here and back, you've got the fact that if they're working on this bit of the seawall, they've got to go all the way back along the island's road networks. And so the decision was made by the Environment Agency to place the main site compound as centrally as possible within the 3.2 kilometre stretch, to minimise as far as possible the impact on the road network and the impact this would have on residents in the long term. And I'll admit, it's not going to have, I'm not going to say it's going to have zero impact on residents. There will be an impact, but as far as possible, the applicant and the requirements of the conditions seek to minimise and mitigate those impacts. But going back to your initial question, other sites were considered, and they are addressed in the report as to why other sites have been discounted and why this site is considered the most suitable.
Any other questions? I'm going to make an exception and let Councillor Savage have a question.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions about the main site, Stephen. When we went to the site visit the other day, you mentioned the vehicular traffic going onto that site, and you mentioned the word cranes. Now, obviously, you've got to get that produce over the seawall, so I'm assuming you're going to be using heavy lift machinery to do that. Is that the case?
I believe that to be the case, but there's also, as part of the seawall works, they're talking about widening the accesses through the seawall as well to enable, and that'll be something that will be left longer term. It will be the wider accesses onto the seawall from the landward side. But yes, I believe there is also the need for some heavy lifting machinery as part of the works.
Two other questions. So in respect to the cranes, will they be moving around the site, the main compound site, in terms of turning? Because if they're heavy lift cranes, you're going to have a real trouble getting them in. It's the devil's in the detail for me. I've obviously worked in industrial sites where cranes have been used, so that for me is an issue. The other thing I wanted to ask is the gate on the eastern end of the compound. Will there be vehicular traffic going to the south side of the park as well, because the park is still going to be used? So I'm concerned that heavy vehicles are going to be trying to get through the embanked area between Eastern Esplanade and the Marine Parade.
So insofar as heavy machinery or cranes turning, I believe there will be some movement of heavy machinery between the site compounds, and as you say, they are proposing an access out of the eastern side of the site compound in order to access Marine Parade, whether the Environment Agency choose to use Marine Parade or they build a separate construction road next to it. There is quite a large area within the site here. This is all open storage and prefabrication area, so there's plenty of room within the site confines to turn, and there will also be access up onto the seawall where they're proposing to temporarily widen the existing landward path up at the top of the seawall in order to enable their machinery and equipment to move along the top of the seawall itself. I was going to say, I hope that answers your question a bit more.
Sorry, Chairman, just one final point. So I know it's not this application, because that would obviously be subsequent applications in terms of vehicular movements on the Marine Parade side. I am concerned about vehicular usage adjacent to that park if the park is still being used. That's the only thing. But again, that will be in another application, I'm assuming.
They're proposing to have banksmen as part of the both sides. So you'd have you've got the gates here and gates here, and you've got the gatehouse here. There's proposed to be banksmen wherever there's and workers on site. So I think whilst it's next to a play area, and obviously there's the potential for conflict between users of the play, children using the play area. It's highly unlikely that, for instance, a digger's going to come herring out at 40 mile an hour without anyone clearing the way first. And as part of the scheme, they're proposing to, in order to minimise the conflict, proposing to introduce slow speed limits for heavy machinery in order to, so that members of the public are aware of movements and banksmen are able to clear the way of pedestrians, children and the like.
Are there any further questions? Sorry.
While everyone's been, thank you. While everyone's been skiing a little bit off piste, just a few residents have actually asked me about the accessibility issues. And although you've said that these are potentially within the gift of the agencies that are doing it, and maybe it's for another time, a lot of people have said that it's not particularly accessible. The angle should be changed. Is this something moving forward that we could look at post any potential works? Accessibility, as in just improving the ramps, making the angles different, you know?
It's certainly something the council could look at.
Yeah.
As I've said, unfortunately, it's not something that we can require but it's certainly something that could be looked at. And if members are that way inclined and they wish for it, it's certainly something that could be looked into and could happen.
Councillor Bartonville.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one quick one. While this project is going on, obviously it's going over a quite considerable amount of time, will there be a liaison officer around with a helpline number for the residents to speak to and speak with during this time if they are finding certain issues and certain things that are a grievance from at this time? How will the local residents be supported during this works and the updates and what's happening, just so that they feel engaged in it and that they know they've got people they can call? Thank you.
So, as I detailed earlier, the requirements of the conditioner that they publish the working times so that members of the public can be well informed. They're also proposing, which isn't part of the planning application, doesn't require planning permission, to have a liaison officer based at certain times of the week in I believe it's the Friends of Concord Beach hut. So that would provide a physical point of contact. There will also be contact details on each of the sites of sort of on-duty personnel, is usual for construction compounds of this size, so that if there's a particular issue, safety, amenity, they can contact someone, and failing that, if there are any issues regarding breaches of conditions, members of the public can come to the planning department and we're able to investigate as well and look into things as well.
Councillor Barker?
Just very briefly, from a council perspective, would we have a single point of contact as opposed to firing off lots of emails and flying around? Would there be a single point of contact for us, as in like an overall site supervisor, someone we could feedback directly to?
There wouldn't, at the moment we've not got someone who's going to be the overall contact, although having dealt with the planning applications for all of them myself, I'm happy to act as a sort of point of contact for members. If there's anything from members of the public and anything like that, if it's to do with a breach of condition or something they're doing that they shouldn't be, the best bet is to fill out our online enforcement form, which gives us all of the information we require to look at taking any action that's needed. But if there's any queries or anything, if they could, more than welcome to email into the planning department and we can do our best to answer any questions or queries that they have, or point them in the direction of maybe someone at the Environment Agency or their contractor who might be able to help them, better place to help them. Councillor
Thornton, please.
Yes, just on the issue of contacting the council for enforcement issues or concerns, we have a deficiency in our enforcement at the moment. That is giving us a lead time that is not conducive with somebody having an immediate problem on the site that they need looking at. So how are we going to address that?
Something of this scale and something of this, I mean, I appreciate it's temporary, but there's a degree of permanence to it, and the impact, if it's not dealt with as soon as reasonably possible, will have on residents. It's something that if we received a complaint from a member of the public, I would ask a member of the team to, as soon as possible, as soon as they can, investigate. It's also, we've developed, during the application stage, we've developed good working relationships with the Environment Agency and their contractor, Balfour Beatty. So in the event of receiving a complaint, one of my first ports of call would be to contact them straight away to find out, right, has there been a breach, and to remind them straight away that you are required, what they are required to do, would be the first port of call. That doesn't involve anyone going out. It's something that can be done almost immediately. But as I said, it would be something that would be prioritised, given the degree of harm that could arise from consistent breaches.
Are there any more questions for the planning officer? Councillor Taylor, please.
On the main compound, these houses, you're going to have a 2.5 metre fence in front of the front windows. That's their view for the next 4 years. Are they entitled to any compensation for the aggro, for that, for example, for the noise, for whatever's going on, either from the council or the Environment Agency?
They're not entitled, as far as I'm aware, there's no compensation that they're entitled to. The requirements, insofar as noise is concerned, Environmental Health have not raised any objections to it, subject to the conditions set out in the report. And I admit they will be looking out on a hoarding. The applicant has tried their best. The houses on this will be looking out on what's called a leaf effect hoarding. It's still a hoarding, I'll admit, but at the very least it's slightly more attractive than having sort of something unattractive as the hoarding, and there isn't a right to a view across land, unfortunately. So there's not something that could be compensated for in that way.
Councillor Aycott.
Thank you, Chairman. I could ask the officer that when this work is completed, that the contractors remove all the items that they're brought onto the site. I mean, as you possibly know, if you walk around Canvey Island, you find loads of boards which have been put up for various jobs now have been taken down and thrown in the hedge or against the side of the road. Another example is Thorney Bay Road had new the surface water drains, gullies along the road were repiped, and when you go up to the welcome hut now, by the slope, the disability slope to go up onto the seawall, there's a wire frame cage been put around it now, but there's a heap of gravel which has been left behind. The car park in Thorney Bay was used by that contractor, and that was all churned up, and quite a bit of it the councillors have had to get planings and put on it. So can we kind of make sure, or the Environment Agency is aware that their contractor makes a proper job in clearing up and tidying up afterwards? Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, the Environment Agency and their contractor are aware of the requirements, and that's part of one of the reasons of the condition is the site survey before and the site survey afterwards. If anything was left on the site, unless it was there before the site survey was done, so it was included in part of the site survey, if it's still there after the event, it's something that the council can enforce against and can require the applicant to remove and or reinstate or whatever's required to prevent that sort of thing. That's the reason behind that condition, is to try and prevent that sort of thing from happening on these site compounds.
So again, are there any more questions? Right, we will now consider each of the applications in turn, starting with item 1, land to the east of Eastern Esplanade and to the south of Athol Close, Canvey Island, which is Canvey Island East Ward. The planning officer's recommendation is for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report and as amended this evening. For the purpose of debate, I move the recommendation. Who would like to speak first? Go, Councillor Anderson, please.
This is the main compound you're talking about? The main compound?
Yep.
Right. The residents don't want it. It's too close to their houses. There's going to be major noise and disruption round about their area. A bat survey still needs to be done properly, and the compound needs to be moved back from people's houses, and they don't want to be looking out to that hoarding. Now I realise this is important for 40,000 people on Canvey Island, of course it is, but I wouldn't want to live in Athol Close for the next 2.5, 3 years. Personal opinion, something needs to be done about the compound, and I'm not happy the closeness of that compound. So I certainly won't be voting for this.
Okay. Okay, members, the motion. Sorry, Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, this is tough, as Councillor Anderson just pointed out, the key facts. And previously I've been on the Essex Flood Partnership meetings and stuff, and it's important for Canvey that these sea walls are repaired. You saw from the pictures earlier that the walls need repairing. And I feel for the people who are going to live opposite this for a period of time. And I think tonight we discussed lots of things to try and alleviate as many of these issues as possible. It's going to be awful for a few people. The few people live there, but it's for the benefit of the whole of Canvey, and I think it needs to be done. So we need to consider that when we discuss it. And as we discussed round and round, we went discussing this, and I would, we need to mention in this as we can. I know it comes under goodwill and improvement, but I would like the council to work with developers, Baywatch, Friends of Concord Beach, residents, and the Canvey Town Council on working on the landscape and reinstatement improvements, including access ramps for these sites. Can we put that in some form? I know it's goodwill, but could we put it in as in some form in the actual application?
It's not something we could condition because it doesn't meet the conditions test. However, it is something that we can, as a council, we can work with the applicant, and we can certainly have discussions with them about along the lines that you're talking about.
And that will be recorded in this decision, whichever way it goes.
Oh, sorry, just to make clear, I'll make reference to what you've just said, but if it can't be a condition, you can't amend the decision that's about to be made. Okay.
Councillor Skipper, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, obviously this is a debate, this is a difficult decision for this committee to have to make tonight, and what we need to do is obviously weigh the benefits to the whole community of Canvey Island with the disadvantages during the 2.5 year period. This site is, especially to the main compound now, will be in situ. I have some concerns about the closeness of the access of Athol Coast to the compound 4, which is down to 4 metres in some parts. Even at 10 metres, a 2.4 metre hoarding is a significant, look at for 2.5 years. But I do understand what you've said, that there is no right to a view. and that's not something we can consider as a planning committee. Can I carry on? Sorry, Chairman. Thank you. Yeah. So that is a concern I have about that. I also have concern about the access link between what we know as Temporary Compound 4, which is the B70 Memorial Ground site. As Councillor Savage alluded to, will run in front of the to the south side of the children's play area. And now I understand you said there will be some security on site to make sure that access is clear for the vehicles. But it's a concern, okay, to me that a large vehicle will be travelling, that close to a children's play area, and for the safety of the users of that site. So I need to take that on trust that the site manager will have that under control. But as I say, overall, I do understand the need for this. Okay, so reluctantly, okay, I think I will be supporting this application. But I do understand the concerns of the residents, especially those directly involved by the main compound, and hopefully the contractors and the Department Agency will adhere to all the stipulations that are in the conditions very, very strictly, and that are monitored strictly. So I think overall the advantages to the whole of the community of Canvey Island outweigh the disadvantages for a 2.5 year period. So reluctantly, yes, I think I will have to support this application. Thank you.
Councillor Thornton, please.
Yeah, we do have to consider the wider picture here, but I can see both sides. Because we're considering them as individual applications, if this particular one, this particular compound is refused, does it have a domino effect and the entire work can't carry on for the revetment work? Or
in a sense, this facility provides the facilities needed that aren't provided on the other sites: the staff welfare, large amount of parking, open material storage, and pre-working areas. So if this application was refused, I don't believe that it would have a knock-on effect insofar as that the works to the seawall would be delayed in their entirety, not just a certain section.
And secondly, is there an option to defer, to actually go back and look at the other sites that were previously looked at?
It's with me to decide whether a deferral is warranted. I'm satisfied that, from my professional opinion, that the Environment Agency have considered alternative reasonable sites and have done their due diligence in considering other sites. I don't feel that there would be any benefit to deferring the item, especially given that any deferral would likely delay and significantly delay the scheme being carried out to the entire of the seawall.
Councillor Mumford, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think we need to look at the amount of work that the Environment Agency has undertaken already regarding the sites across the island and what is the most appropriate. And one can see the logic in the argument of where this site is. However, I live in this area and I go past this place most days, and I can absolutely understand residents' feelings. However, if this site was to go somewhere else on the island, we would be confronted, I'm sure, with the same resistance from those residents that would be affected. So, and along with my colleague here, reluctantly, I'm going to support this application because I think we need to progress this for the good of the wider community. It's a £50 million piece of civil engineering that's going to protect Canvey Island in the long run, and ultimately that's in everybody's interest. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Barton-Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Is there anything we can add into this around the reinstatement of road conditions, as my colleague alluded to earlier? We know the roads of Castle Point Borough Council are continuously coming under scrutiny with the potholes and the quality of our roads in this area, with these large vehicles carrying aggregates and heavy vehicles. The conditions of the roads around there for the other road users is a big concern. Is there any way of building the roads and the reinstatement of their quality into any of the terms and conditions for this development?
So condition 5 of this item requires there to be a highways condition survey undertaken along the key routes that the heavy goods vehicles will be taking, and then following the site condition survey, it requires that after the works that the road is reinstated to the condition it was in the site survey. So if there's a pothole there when they do the site survey, it won't necessarily fall on the Environment Agency to fill the pothole or repair the damage. But if it's anything that happens between the site survey taking place on those roads and them demobilising their site compounds, it is something they would be responsible for repairing.
Councillor further, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Although not part of the decision making of the committee this evening, thank you for the opportunity. If I could just make an observation, particularly in reference to the question about deferment. It seems to me that in the planning of this, the Environment Agency have said that they've done diligent work at looking at, I believe the number was 20 sites, and one of these was the Chapman Sands Sailing Club, which is very close in proximity to this, the main compound site. It seems to me that the greatest objection for the whole of this plan, for all of these sites, relates to the close proximity on the northern boundary of the main compound site to the houses adjacent to it. It would seem to me, with a little bit of creative thinking, and I'd be interested to know whether the Environment Agency actually considered this, is that a considerable portion of that obstructive area to the north of the compound is to do with welfare. Would it not have been possible for them to have included a 6th site in their planning and then put all of the welfare facilities on that Chapman Sand site and then free up space to enable that northern boundary to be brought forward probably another 4 or even 5 or even 6 or 7 metres? It was only, to me, it just seems to me that the creative thinking behind this in terms of relieving the obvious discomfort and disadvantage to those residents hasn't been fully explored. And if there was a possibility of deferment, I would suggest that there might be, for that particular site, a deferment, particularly to examine the possibility of bringing in another site to offload some of the density so that that site could be made more friendly, if you like, to the residents around it. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Fry. Councillor Aycock.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As I said before, this is the ward I'm involved in. I've got kind of mixed feelings about it. I completely understand the residents' concerns about it, but at the same time I can understand that we've got to go somewhere, and other places which have been suggested, which originally comes as a good idea, going down over Small Gaines somewhere or up by Canvey Heights. It sounds a good place, but when you think of heavy machinery moving in the mornings and on Canvey Road where I live, that's already congested. And without having a slow moving crane or a tractor pulling something along, it'll be kind of worse still. I can see the point about the Chapman Sands site, but my understanding is that that's been sold to a private company, and whether they would allow it to go on their site or whether they would want a high return fee for it to go on there, we don't really know, but as I say, I've got lots of concerns about this completely. So all I can say to the residents is, if it gets passed and there are problems, I'm willing though for you to contact me or my two colleagues, and we will take it up with the borough and to get them to keep chasing it up with the contractors.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. You finished? Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Do you want to say any more, Steve? Yeah, it's all right. Yeah. Kim? Okay. Members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion.
Are you voting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 4, Chairman.
Thank you.
Again.
Those against the motion?
1. Thank you. Thank you. That's it, Chairman. That's everyone. So it's approved.
This application is now approved. Item 2, Wooden Park, Thorney Bay, Canvey Island, Essex, South Ward. The planning officer's recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Hart, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I raise the same as I did on the last one, that the council work with the developers, Bay Watch, Friends of Concord Beach residents and Canvey Town Council on work on reinstatement offers and improvements to the access to the site, as mentioned in the previous application. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak at all? Okay. Members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. The application is approved. The planning, south of Western Esplanade, west of the Welcome Hut, Canvey Island, South Ward again. The planning officer's recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report. For the purpose of debate, I move the recommendation. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Hart.
Sorry, Chairman. Same again, and can I save it for the same thing for all the rest of them, please? Same it again.
Same again?
Yeah. Is that all right? Do you want me to read it? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 for approval.
Right.
Unanimous.
That's approved. Item 4. Western part of the existing Eastern Esplanade car park and south of the Eastern Esplanade Bandstand area on Canvey Island, South Ward again. The planning officer's recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Who would like to speak first? Now, come on, Okay. Members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please?
Those 4. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay.
For approval. Unanimous.
Okay. Item 5. Land located to the east of Marine Parade and Beveland Road, Canvey Island. That's East Ward. The planning officer's recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Mumford, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, once again, broadly supportive of this, however, with the proviso that the Environment Agency look at reconsidering using Marine Parade, and that I understand they're going to look at moving that to the south of Marine Parade, and on that understanding then I could support this. Thank you.
Yes, we can. I can certainly speak. We can certainly speak with the Environment Agency. As I explained earlier, it's not something we can require, but it's certainly something we can work with the Environment Agency on, in a similar vein to Councillor Hart's mentioned earlier in the debates.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Right, members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please?
There's 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 for approval. Unanimous, Chairman.
That's it.
So that completes.
Yep. Well, that concludes the business for this meeting. Thank you very much for attending, and good night. And have a safe journey home.